What if the people who figured out how to beat belly fat weren't scientists in a lab, but ancient Greeks living over 2,000 years ago? Here's the thing that will shock you. Visceral fat, the dangerous fat packed deep around your organs, doesn't respond well to cardio. Study after study now confirms that. A 2023 meta-analysis published in Obesity Reviews looked at over 117,000 participants and found that aerobic exercise alone produced only modest reductions in visceral fat, averaging just 1.1% loss over 12 weeks. That's almost nothing. But specific lifestyle habits, the kind the ancient Greeks built their entire culture around, are proving to be dramatically more powerful. And the number one habit on this list. Researchers didn't find it in a gym. They found it at the dinner table, but we'll get to that. First, let's count down from habit number 4. Number 4. Walking after meals, the Greek peripatetic tradition. Aristotle didn't just teach philosophy. He walked while he did it. His school of thought was literally called the Peripatetics, from the Greek word peripatein, which means to walk around. His students followed him through the covered walkways of the Lyceum in Athens, thinking and moving at the same time. It turns out that habit was doing a lot more than sharpening their minds. Post-meal walking, even very short bouts of it, has a direct and measurable impact on visceral fat accumulation. Here's why this matters so much. When you eat, your blood glucose spikes. Your body releases insulin to manage that spike. The higher and more frequent those insulin spikes are over time, the more your body is signaled to store fat, specifically in the visceral region around your organs. Walking after a meal blunts that glucose spike significantly. A 2022 study published in Sports Medicine analyzed 7 different randomized controlled trials and found that walking for just 2 to 5 minutes after eating reduced postprandial blood glucose levels by up to 17% compared to sitting. A different study from George Washington University found that 3 short 15-minute walks after meals were more effective at lowering blood sugar over 24 hours than a single 45-minute walk taken in the morning. That's a huge deal. Same time investment. Completely different metabolic result. The Greeks didn't do this by accident. The Mediterranean climate, the open agoras, the culture of walking to socialize and think, it all added up to consistent post-meal movement every single day. And when you move your muscles after eating, those muscles act like a glucose sponge. They pull sugar out of the bloodstream and use it for energy, instead of letting insulin shovel it into fat storage. Over months and years, that adds up to significantly less visceral fat accumulation. To apply this habit, you don't need to do anything extreme. Aim for a 10 to 15-minute walk after your largest meal of the day. If you can do it after all 3 meals, even better. Keep the pace relaxed. This isn't a workout. It's a metabolic reset. The key is consistency. Even 5 minutes beats sitting on the couch. If you're in an office, a short walk around the building counts. If it's raining, walking in place for a few minutes still produces measurable glucose benefits, as the research on muscle contraction confirms. The mechanism is in the muscle contraction itself, not the scenery. One more thing worth knowing about this habit: the timing window matters. Research published in Diabetologia in 2016 found that the glucose blunting effect of post-meal walking was most pronounced when movement began within 30 minutes of finishing eating. After 60 minutes, the benefit dropped significantly. The ancient Greeks didn't time this with a stopwatch, but their cultural rhythm, eating, then transitioning to conversation while walking through colonnades, naturally landed them inside that optimal window. You can replicate this by simply making it a rule. Finish eating, then get up and move. No waiting, no digesting on the couch first. Just move. Now let's move up the list to a habit that the Greeks treated as non-negotiable. If this is new to you, subscribe. We break down science like this every week in a way that actually makes sense. Number 3. The Mediterranean eating pattern: olive oil, fish, and legumes. The ancient Greeks didn't eat like modern Westerners. Their diet was built on a foundation of olive oil, fish, legumes, vegetables, whole grains, and moderate amounts of wine. This wasn't a diet trend. It was simply the food available to them. And it turns out their food environment was doing something remarkable to their metabolic health. Modern research on the Mediterranean diet is some of the most robust nutrition science we have. A landmark study published in JAMA Internal Medicine in 2020, which followed over 32,000 Italian adults for 8 years, found that those who closely adhered to a Mediterranean-style eating pattern had a 24% lower chance of developing abdominal obesity compared to those who didn't. And this wasn't just about weight. Imaging studies specifically measuring visceral fat showed real differences. A 2019 clinical trial published in Gut, one of the top gastroenterology journals, assigned 294 participants to a Mediterranean diet or a low-fat diet for 18 months. The Mediterranean group lost significantly more visceral fat, with MRE scans showing a 6.1% reduction in deep abdominal fat versus just 3.2% in the low-fat group. That's nearly double the visceral fat loss. Why does this pattern work so well? There are a few key mechanisms. Olive oil is rich in olecanthal, a compound that acts similarly to ibuprofen in reducing inflammation. Chronic low-grade inflammation is a major driver of visceral fat. Inflamed fat tissue becomes metabolically active in the worst way, releasing harmful cytokines that promote more fat storage. Extra virgin olive oil directly disrupts this cycle. Studies show that consuming around 3.5 tablespoons per day produces measurable reductions in inflammatory markers like CRP and IL-6 within 6 weeks. Then there's the role of legumes, lentils, chickpeas, fava beans, which were staples in ancient Greek cuisine going back to at least 4000 BCE based on archaeological evidence. Legumes are exceptionally high in resistant starch and soluble fiber, both of which feed your gut microbiome and reduce systemic inflammation. A 2016 analysis in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that eating legumes just 4 times per week was associated with a 14% reduction in waist circumference over 10 weeks. And the fish. Greeks living near the coast ate fish multiple times a week, primarily sardines, mackerel, and sea bass. These are all high in omega-3 fatty acids, which have been shown in dozens of studies to directly reduce visceral fat tissue. One trial published in the Journal of Nutrition in 2014 found that supplementing with 3 grams of omega-3s daily while following a moderate calorie deficit led to 14% more visceral fat loss than calorie restriction alone. The omega-3s appear to work by activating fat-burning genes through a receptor called PPAR-alpha, while simultaneously reducing the inflammatory signals that keep visceral fat locked in place. Canned sardines, by the way, are one of the most cost-effective sources of omega-3s available. The Greeks didn't have access to expensive supplements, and neither do you need them. To bring this into your own life, start by making olive oil your primary cooking fat. Use it generously. Add a serving of legumes to your diet at least 3 times a week. This can be as simple as adding chickpeas to a salad or having lentil soup. Include fatty fish like sardines or salmon at least twice a week, and shift away from refined grains toward whole grains like barley and farro, which were Greek staples and have a much lower glycemic impact. You don't need to eat perfectly. You need to shift the pattern consistently. And that brings us to habit number 2, which most people completely ignore. Number 2, midday rest, the Greek mesimeri. The Greeks had a concept called mesimeri, the midday rest. After the morning's work and the main meal of the day, which Greeks typically ate around midday, rest was considered not a luxury but a biological necessity. This wasn't laziness. It was a cultural recognition of something science is now catching up to. The body has a natural dip in alertness in the early afternoon that is hardwired into our circadian biology. Sleep and visceral fat have a relationship that most people have no idea about. When you're sleep deprived or when your sleep quality is chronically poor, your cortisol levels rise. Cortisol is your primary stress hormone, and it directly targets visceral fat. It does this through glucocorticoid receptors that are highly concentrated in abdominal adipose tissue. Essentially, cortisol tells your body to store fat in the belly and around your organs specifically. It also elevates ghrelin, the hunger hormone, while suppressing leptin, the satiety hormone, pushing you toward overeating at the same time. A 2010 study from Wake Forest University tracked 1,107 adults over 5 years and found that those sleeping 5 hours or fewer per night accumulated visceral fat at a rate 32% faster than those sleeping 6 to 7 hours. Even more striking, those sleeping more than 8 hours also showed increased visceral fat accumulation, about 22% more than the optimal group. The sweet spot was clear. But here's where the Greek midday rest becomes interesting from a research standpoint. A study published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism in 2019 found that people who took a short midday nap of 30 to 45 minutes after a period of mild sleep restriction showed significantly lower cortisol levels throughout the afternoon and evening compared to those who stayed awake. Their cortisol recovery was measurably better. And lower cortisol means less visceral fat signaling. A separate large-scale Greek cohort study, published in the Archives of Internal Medicine and involving over 23,000 adults followed for 6 years, found that regular midday nappers had a 37% lower risk of coronary mortality. While that study focused on cardiovascular outcomes, the mechanism was linked directly to reduced cortisol and inflammation, the same biological pathways that drive visceral fat accumulation. The key here is not to just sleep more at night, though that matters enormously, but also to protect your afternoon cortisol curve. The Greeks did this naturally through their culture. You can do it by building in a short rest after your midday meal. It doesn't even have to be sleep. Even lying down with your eyes closed for 20 minutes in a quiet environment has been shown to lower cortisol measurably compared to sitting at a desk. If a nap isn't realistic for you, the next best option is to protect your night's sleep aggressively. That means keeping your bedroom cool, around 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, which research shows optimizes deep sleep stages. It means cutting off screens at least 30 minutes before bed, since blue light exposure after dark suppresses melatonin and delays sleep onset by up to 90 minutes. And it means eating your largest meal at midday rather than at night, which is exactly what the Greeks did. Because late heavy meals spike insulin before sleep, disturb sleep architecture, and raise overnight cortisol. Now here it is, the number one habit, the one researchers almost didn't see coming. Number 1. Communal eating and stress reduction, the symposium effect. In ancient Greece, the symposium wasn't just a drinking party. The word itself comes from syn meaning together and painein meaning to drink. But these gatherings, held reclining on cushioned couches, eating slowly, talking at length, laughing, debating, represented something far more important than socializing. They represented a complete physiological state of safety and calm during the act of eating. And that combination, social connection plus relaxed, slow, communal eating, turns out to be one of the most powerful anti-visceral fat interventions ever studied. Let's talk about chronic psychological stress, because this is the real driver of visceral fat that almost nobody talks about. When you are chronically stressed, work pressure, loneliness, financial anxiety, time pressure, your HPA axis, which stands for hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, stays in a state of low-level activation. This keeps cortisol elevated throughout the day. And as we just discussed with habit 2, elevated cortisol is a direct command to your body to deposit fat in the visceral region. It's not a maybe. It's a biochemical instruction. A 2000 study published in Psychosomatic Medicine, led by Dr. Elissa Epel, one of the world's leading stress researchers, showed that women with high waist-to-hip ratios, a marker of visceral fat, had measurably higher cortisol reactivity in response to stress challenges compared to women with lower ratios. The direction of causation runs both ways. Stress causes visceral fat, and visceral fat generates more stress hormones. It becomes a loop. Now here's where the Greek communal eating tradition comes in with stunning scientific support. A 2021 study published in PLOS ONE involving 13,000 participants across 8 countries found that people who regularly ate meals with others had significantly lower rates of depression, anxiety, and perceived stress, with the effect being stronger than either exercise or diet quality alone for mental health outcomes. The act of sharing food with people you trust, eating slowly, laughing, and being present is not a soft lifestyle benefit. It is a hard cortisol-lowering mechanism. Eating more slowly, which communal meals naturally encourage, also independently reduces visceral fat through a completely different pathway. When you eat fast, you override your satiety hormones. It takes roughly 20 minutes for your gut to signal your brain that you're full via peptide YY and GLP-1, hormones that tell you to stop eating. Fast eating means you consistently overshoot your caloric needs before those signals arrive. A 2018 study in BMJ Open followed over 59,000 participants with diabetes and found that fast eaters were 59% more likely to be obese compared to slow eaters, even after controlling for overall caloric intake. And slow eating during a communal meal does something else fascinating. Chewing thoroughly increases saliva production and activates the cephalic phase digestive response, your body's pre-digestion preparation phase. This improves nutrient absorption, reduces blood glucose spikes, and lowers the insulin response to the same meal by up to 20%, according to a study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 2011. Lower insulin response means less signal to store visceral fat. All of this happens simply from chewing your food more and eating with other people without rushing. The Greeks built this into their culture involuntarily. Their meals were long because connection was the point. The food was almost secondary to the conversation. And the result was a population that ate slowly, digested well, experienced lower chronic stress, and maintained lower cortisol profiles than almost any modern population. To apply this habit, it has to go beyond a tip. It has to become a priority. Try to eat at least one meal a day without your phone, without screens, and ideally with someone else. Put your fork down between bites. Chew each mouthful at least 20 times. Make the meal itself feel like an event, not a refueling stop. If you eat alone often, even eating in a calm environment with music you enjoy has been shown to lower cortisol compared to eating while watching stressful content or scrolling social media. If chronic stress is a real issue in your life, and for most people it is, consider what the Greeks also did as part of their philosophical tradition: structured time for reflection. Stoic practices like journaling, deliberate breathing, and time in nature were part of their daily rhythm. Modern research on these practices is overwhelming. A 2013 meta-analysis in health psychology reviewed 208 studies and found that mindfulness-based stress reduction produced significant reductions in cortisol over 8 weeks, with downstream effects on abdominal fat in trials that included body composition measurements. The real lesson from ancient Greece isn't any one food or one practice in isolation. It's a whole system that kept cortisol low, kept post-meal glucose blunted, kept inflammation suppressed, and kept people connected and calm. Those 4 factors together create a metabolic environment where visceral fat has no reason to accumulate. So there you have it, the 4 Greek habits that research shows are more effective at burning visceral fat than cardio alone. Short walks after meals, the Mediterranean eating pattern, protecting your midday rest and night sleep, and slowing down to eat in community. None of these require a gym. None require a supplement. They require a shift in how you structure your day, closer to the way humans lived for centuries before modern life pulled us away from all of it. The irony is that we've spent decades searching for the secret to burning visceral fat in new technologies, new pills, and new exercise machines, while the answer was sitting in ancient history the whole time. The Greeks weren't trying to optimize their health. They were just living in a way that naturally aligned with human biology. Their walks were naturally social. Their food was real and completely unprocessed. Their afternoons were deliberately protected. Their meals were meaningful events, not rushed interruptions. You don't have to overhaul your entire life to start. Pick one of these 4 habits and commit to it seriously for 2 weeks. The post-meal walk is the easiest entry point. 2 minutes after dinner is all it takes to begin shifting your metabolic response. Add a second habit the following week. Stack them slowly, and within 60 to 90 days you will be operating in a fundamentally different metabolic environment, one where your body has far less reason to hold onto visceral fat and far more capacity to release it. The science is there. The Greeks already showed us the path. Now, we want to hear from you. Which of these 4 habits do you already do? And which one surprised you the most? Share with us your experiences and opinions in the comments below. We love to hear them. Thanks for watching.